Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held, but just ourselves and immortality.
We slowly drove. He knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too for His Civility.
We passed the school where children stroll at recess in the rain. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun.
Or rather, he passed us. The dews drew, quivering and chill.
For only Gossamer, my gown, my Tippet, only two. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground.
Since then, these centuries and yet feel shorter than the day I first surmised the horse's head were toward eternity.
Because I could not stop for death.
By Emily Dickinson. The main theme of this poem is death and immortality. In this poem, the poet describes how she visualizes death and what is a role in her life. This poem is a simple lyric that talks about Emily Dickinson's fearlessness in the face of death. The title of the poem means that the poetic persona has no time to wait for death. Her mind is fearlessness and rational. She takes death as a natural phenomenon like the withering of plants. There is no fear in accepting what must occur. Hence, the poet can burden her mind with the thoughts of something natural, not only to herself but also to the whole of humankind. The type of this poem is a lyric poem. The author wrote this poem from the first-person point of view. From the very first line, it becomes clear it's going to be a subjective poem about the inevitability of death and its yearning for eternity. Whatsoever the first-person speaker presented in the poem makes it an example of a free verse lyric. This poem has a very distinct tone and mood. The tone, which is the voice of the poet of a speaker in the poem, is calm and measured. And the mood of a poem is the emotional experiences that the poet is accepting to create for the reader. Both the tone and mood are tied together. This poem consists of 6 stanzas, which is divided into sets of 4 lines, known as quatrains. The meter is much more consistent. It resembles a regular metrical pattern. The first and the third lines are made up of 4 sets of 2 beats, or a total of 8 syllables. The first of these beats is unstressed and the second is stressed. This is known as iambic tetrameter. The second and fourth lines also use iambic, but there is only 3 sets of 2 beats in each line. This is known as iambic trimeter.
This poem makes use several literary devices such as alliteration, allusion, personification, and enchantment. The first one is alliteration. It occurs when words are used in succession or at least appear close together and begin with the same sound. For example, labor and leisure in the second stanza, school and strove in the third stanza. The next one is personification. It occurs when a poet imbues a non-human creature or object with human characteristics. That is very clearly stated in the first stanza. The next one is allusion. Allusion is an expression that means to call something specific to the mind without directly stating it. Although it is not clearly stated in the lines of this poem, it is clear that the speaker is supposed to be in some sort of afterlife. Another important technique commonly used in this poem is enchantment. It occurs when a line is cut off before its natural stopping point. For example, the transition between the lines 3 and 4 of the first stanza and lines 2 and 3 of the second. The message of this poem is one should not fear death, as it's not that horrific one thinks of. Death is rather gentlemanly, prudent, and civilized. Now, I would like to analyze the poem stanza by stanza, start from the first stanza. In the first stanza, the author personifies death, portraying him as a close friend or perhaps even a gentleman sweetheart. In this first stanza, she reveals that she welcomes death when she says, "He kindly stopped for me." The pleasant tone of the poem is further suggests that the author is quite comfortable with that. Then we move to the second stanza. In the second stanza, the author reveals her willingness to go with that when she says that she had put away labor and leisure for his civility. This further reveals that the author has come to terms with her own mortality. Then we move to the third stanza. In the third stanza, they drive past the school where the children strove, implying that the author is generously given a few moments to remember her childhood. They then drive past the gazing grain, allowing the author to think back upon the prime of her life. Then they pass the setting sun. They symbolize that the author's death. The sunset is beautiful and gentle, and the passing from life to eternity is portrayed as such. Okay, then we move to the fourth stanza. In the fourth stanza, there is a sudden shift in tone. Suddenly, now that the sun has set, the author realizes that she is quite cold and she shivers. Then she becomes aware that she is underdressed. Prior to this moment of realization, the author felt quite comfortable with death and immortality. Then we move to the fifth stanza. In fifth stanza is about her moment of realization that she has been seduced by death. They pause before her new house, a swelling of the crowd. She claims the roof was scarcely visible and the cornice in the ground. The tone becomes one of disappointment as the author realizes that that is not all she thought it would be. Okay, last but not least is the sixth stanza. The sixth stanza, it has now been centuries and yet feels shorter than today as life goes on without her. It has been centuries since that moment of realization when she first surmised that death had seduced her and that he had appeared a kindly gentleman at first, but had left her alone in the dark, cold, and damp grave. Okay, that's all the analysis about this poem.